As we've been hearing, the government is going to publish its plans today for Lords reform. It wants a chamber of 450 members, 80% of whom are elected. But today will be just the start of a long, stormy passage through Parliament. Here's our chief political correspondent, Ben Wright.
It was signed off in Cabinet yesterday without a dissenting voice. But when the government's plan for a largely elected upper chamber is launched in the lower house, the arguments will be fierce, the outcome impossible to predict. For Liberal Democrats, House of Lords reform is a passion. For many Conservatives, an unwanted pain in the neck. There is a mix of views on the Labour benches, but Ed Miliband wholeheartedly backs the principles of the government's Lords reform plans. So he'll tell his MPs to support the bill when it first comes to the Commons on July the 10th, but will vote against the government's timetable or programme motion for steering it through the Commons.
The point about this is these are big, serious, complicated constitutional reforms, and what you can't do is rush them.
Tristram Hunt is a Labour MP.
We want to be absolutely clear that the new relationship between the Commons and the Lords won't be subject to judicial intervention. We want to thrash out the role of the bishops. We want to make the case for a referendum. We're concerned about the length of 15-year terms. I mean, I could go on, Ben. I mean, there's a lot there for us to analyse and to discuss.
Conservative MPs may well join Labour in opposing the programme motion, in which case it is defeated. There then becomes a very scrappy series of fights on the floor of the House resembling Maastricht, and the thing falls apart. And the sort of reform that you've wanted to see for years and years and years is once again hoofed into the long grass and is never seen again.
Not necessarily. I mean, the chief whip of the government is a big, slightly scary, burly figure. If he can't manage his usually rather sort of lacklustre and pusillanimous backbenchers, he's not up to the job.
Big and burly they might be, but the Tory whips do have a very tough job on their hands. Well, I've just bumped into the Conservative MP and PPS, Conor Burns. You are opposed to Lords reform. How do you see it playing out?
Well, I'm in favour of Lords reform. I'm against Lords abolition, which is what Nick Clegg is proposing.
Labour have said that they will oppose the programme motion, the timetabling for this bill. What are you going to do? Are you going to join Labour in opposing the programme motion?
This is major constitutional change. Major constitutional change is not usually guillotined in debate. And I think if we're going to have this debate, we need to have it at length and in full. And we should have it in committee on the floor of the House of Commons, and we should take as much time as is necessary to do that. So on that basis, I would certainly be attracted to voting against any programme motion that would constrain the amount of time Parliament can debate this for.
And presumably risk losing your job.
If I lose my job for something that was a mainstream view within the Conservative Party in the last Parliament, which serving cabinet ministers held as their view, so be it.
And Mr Burns is not alone. Another Conservative ministerial aide is promising in private to join Labour in voting against the timetable motion. And it was suggested to me that there are around 50 Tory rebels ready to defeat the motion by voting with the opposition. But it's Labour's call for more time to debate the bill and a referendum on the plan that has infuriated Liberal Democrats, such as the Foreign Office Minister, Jeremy Brown.
Well, I think Labour's stance is probably the most depressing of any party, because what they're doing is playing games, and anybody who thinks that Labour are a progressive, enlightened, reformist party have now found out that they're nothing of the sort. A lot of people listening to this would think, gosh, if Labour stood for anything, it would surely be a sort of egalitarian will of the people. And actually what we're finding out now is the Labour leadership is so cynical, so blinded by hatred for Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems, that they're not even willing to go along with what you would regard as the core principles of their party, if those core principles are espoused by the Liberal Democrats and Nick Clegg. So it is an extraordinary situation Labour now find themselves in. They are the most vocal champions of elitism and privilege in our public life.
All parties backed an elected second chamber in their manifestos, but that's absolutely no guarantee that today's bill will complete a process started more than a century ago.